Yes, I'm finally making progress on my backlog. I only have 1,497 left. You know, I've been thinking a lot about my backlog these days. It's kind of like that list of chores that just keeps piling up and you know you'll be better off just doing them, but instead you spend months learning how to solve a Rubik's Cube and then learning 100 digits of pi. You see, the problem I have is simple. The more handhelds that I have, the more I think about what great games I can replay on these amazing little handhelds. Yeah, replay. I'm gonna be honest, folks. I haven't actually played a new game on a handheld since here. It's been 4 cold months, especially living in New England. It's so damn cold. So I haven't played a new game in a very long time. I know you're probably devastated to find this out, and you might even hate me for it. But I'm here today to make up for living a lie. I'm gonna earn your trust back, no matter how many Final Fantasy games it takes. For every Ubisoft NFT game, there's an old Game Boy Advance gem just waiting to be actually played. For every Cyberpunk 2077, there's 2,077 PlayStation games that I've never heard of. This channel is built on retro games, and by God, we're gonna play some retro games. So who's with me? Anyone? It's just me, huh? Damn. Maybe I should have kept that part about Skyrim. Anyways, in this video, I'm gonna talk about the 5 games from my backlog that I've been playing recently. These are games across all different platforms that have always kind of been on my list, but I've never actually played. I hope you can find some inspiration for old games to play, or maybe decide to play something from your own backlog. Either way, I'll leave the games listed in the description in case you wanna skip the video and get right into gaming. I'm also gonna sprinkle in some other recommendations throughout. So kick back and enjoy 5 backlog gems that I've been playing recently. I just want to give a shout out to LITXNT for sending over this beautiful purple trimui brick with their preloaded CrossMix SD card. The trimui brick has genuinely been my favorite pocket-sized vertical handheld lately, and it's made playing my backlog an absolute joy. And the LITXNT CrossMix SD card is great for anyone who just wants to skip all the legwork and get right into their games. If you're interested in picking one of these up, I'll have an affiliate link in the description below. You'd be getting an awesome product from LITXNT, and you'd be supporting the channel a little bit. So with all that said, let's check out some games. We start our journey in 1995, when 2 titans of the gaming industry came together to develop one of the last major releases of the Super Nintendo era. Square and Nintendo collaborated and released Super Mario RPG the next year. This game was widely acclaimed for its advanced 3D graphics in addition to its writing and overall humor and very unique gameplay. Super Mario RPG was extremely innovative for the time. It actually invented the timed hit battle system, which would later go on to influence many other RPGs. It also used an advanced graphics engine that pushed the SNES hardware to its limits, and they achieved the iconic visual style by using pre-rendered 3D graphics, similar to Donkey Kong Country. This is a game that I've always meant to get around to playing, but just never have. I was obsessed with Paper Mario and the Mario & Luigi RPG series, so I've always wanted to play the first Mario RPG that kind of started it all. So funny enough, we used to not be able to run Super Mario RPG on SNES emulators. It was one of those games that was kind of like Yoshi's Island back in the day, where emulators just wouldn't be able to run at full speed. That's obviously far in the past, and now we can enjoy everything this masterpiece has to offer. I've really been enjoying the writing and snappy humor of this game. It's so crisp and expressive, and it gives me that warm, homey feeling. The gameplay is pretty fun, but battles are a little repetitive. This is the mid-90s, so we're still in the endless encounters era of JRPGs. But this game has enemies on screen in the overworld, so we can just move around them if we don't want to battle. The companion system is very solid, and random buffs keep battles interesting. The different attacks, special moves, and items add a healthy dose of strategy to battles, and the time-based hits are really satisfying to land. There's a lot to love about this game. It's one of those godfathers of modern RPGs, and it's still, without a doubt, worth playing today.
Let me tell you the story of Rayman.
Rayman is one of the series of all time and has quite a roller coaster of a story. It started as a 2D platformer game, and then with the second release, it became a 3D puzzle platformer similar to Mario 64. And with that release, Rayman kind of became the Mario of the PlayStation 1. It was and still is considered to be one of the greatest 3D platformer games of all time. And then Ubisoft being Ubisoft, they released about 43 other Rayman games, and then found infinitely more success with the spin-off Raving Rabbit series. Now rewinding back to 1999, we have Rayman 2, The Great Escape on the PlayStation 1. I've thought about playing Rayman 2 for a long time. I played like 5 minutes of it on the DS using an R4 card back in 2009, and it didn't feel right on the DS. One of the screens was practically blank and the other one just kind of felt dark. I don't know, it just felt weird. But on the trimui brick, it's surprisingly fun. It feels like a classic 3D platforming game from the late 90s. I loaded it up to check if the brick had PS1 upscaling because somebody commented asking about that. But then I found myself playing for over an hour because it's just a really fun game. I came back to it for this video and I've been loving this early 3D era PS1 game. The platforming is great. Rayman can jump and helicopter down to slow his fall. And there's some other platforming gimmicks like swimming, surfing, grappling, you get the idea. The controls are pretty refined. I mean, this is about 3 to 4 years after Super Mario 64 came out, so we're still in the early era of 3D platformers. And they also play well with the bricks layout. When it came to visuals, there's a surprising amount of detail in these graphics. The world doesn't necessarily feel alive by today's standards, but it's charming and well designed. There's 45 levels across different environments and each one is a joy to play. They're like 10 to 20 minutes on average, so the entire game is around 8 to 12 hours. The writing is also shockingly witty and entertaining. There's some cutscenes that actually had me cracking up. I also really fuck with how Rayman busted down at the end of every level. That shit goes hard. Overall, it's no frills, no fuss 3D platforming from the 90s. What more could you want? In 2001, Capcom and Nintendo were working on a new Zelda title for the very successful Game Boy Color. This was a handheld in its twilight year, so they really wanted to deliver an ambitious vision for the final Zelda game of the generation. What started as a plan to interconnect 3 Zelda games got pared down to 2 titles, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. This was in the peak of the dual release era. Pokemon Red and Blue, Robopon Sun and Moon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Dragon Quest, everyone wanted a piece of that 2-for-1 pie. And Zelda was no different. The Oracle games were directed by Hidemaru Fujibayashi, who would later go on to direct a few small-time games, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages features a unique central mechanic of time travel, which you use to go between past and present to solve puzzles and progress through the game. It was also specifically known for emphasizing these puzzles over action, compared to Oracle of Seasons. Now, I decided to play Oracle of Ages because I've been chipping away at the Link's Awakening remake on my Odin 2 Mini. After first launching the game and seeing the blocky visuals, my first thought was, wow, I always forget how huge Game Boy sprites are. It was also immediately apparent that this is a very finely crafted Game Boy game. They'd practically mastered the system hardware at this point, and this game really captured that. The storyline was very captivating. I love the Zelda games that have a very intense intro, like Tears of the Kingdom and Majora's Mask. The ones that immediately establish the doom, giving you a reason to fight and save the world in your grand adventure. It's a very simple game on the surface. Just adventure around and do Zelda stuff. Follow the quests, complete dungeons, etc. But inside there is a pretty engaging storyline that spans throughout time with a lot of excellent puzzle solving mechanics. It's a pretty slow burn, especially with the Game Boy Color graphics and overall pacing. But it sucked me in, and I had a great time getting sucked. Wait. The cutscenes are surprisingly interesting if you like these kinds of storylines, especially when you realize that this entire game, story, and world was on a single Game Boy Color cartridge. I love all the characters they put in there. This game captures the same NPC energy from the N64 Zelda games, so the world feels new but also familiar. There's so many fun mechanics they incorporated in here, like all the different active tools, passive rings, hidden secrets, but there's one mechanic that rises above the rest: time travel. The time travel mechanic is so innovative and interesting, and it adds a whole new dimension to this entire game. It gives the entire game a sense of depth that I've just never felt on any other Game Boy game. Overall, Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Ages is a masterpiece and a must-play for any classic Zelda fan. Rebelstar is a series that I've been interested in playing for a few years. It actually started when I was bored looking to play something on my Vita. I launched XCOM on a whim and ended up falling in love with it. And that's an understatement. I played that game for 50 to 100 hours easy, and then I played XCOM 2 and played the shit out of that game. Ever since playing XCOM 2, I've been looking for a game that captures the same combination of intense strategy and high-risk action. That's when I stumbled upon the Rebelstar series. Or more importantly, this cover. Yeah. Legendary piece of art right here. So Rebelstar is actually a series by the creator of XCOM, Julian Gollop. The entry on the GBA had pretty favorable reviews, and it always seemed to be considered XCOM on the Game Boy Advance. So I tried playing it, and the tutorial is grueling. I played for a tough 30 minutes and then got distracted, but it's always lived on my back burner. This was a perfect excuse to sit down and play Rebelstar. This time around, what stood out to me was how similar the flow and mechanics of the game are to XCOM. It's more like a primitive version of the same game. A bit slower, stripped down, but it has the same spirit. Now, it's not perfect. And even if you like XCOM, this might not be your cup of sectoid juice. The game is separated into story chapters, and you're kind of just railroad tracked through the scenarios without any freedom of choice or influence. Movement and battles are very slow paced, and it even costs action points to pivot your character. Also, just like XCOM, there's a ton of dying on levels because you took the wrong path, missed a shot and killed your teammate, or if you're like me, you just end up save scumming like crazy because some levels just be like that. Also, half the game is literally a tutorial. Half of the game. 11 out of 25 levels are tutorials lightly masked as missions or training. This took me at least a few hours to get through, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it. 6 years and 2 generations later, we're in 2007. id Software and Fountainhead Entertainment were coming off of the success of Doom RPG in 2005, and they were looking to bridge their new mobile game to the DS hardware. I had heard about this game when I was making the Doom RPG for PS Vita video. I've always liked this turn-based first-person style. I played hundreds of hours of The Quest for iOS, and I've been looking for a console game that captures the same feeling. So I loaded up Orcs and Elves on the trimuibrick. The first time I moved, I audibly gasped because I felt home. First-person turn-based fantasy games are my oxygen. I live for these games, man. Like, no joke, I put hundreds of hours into the Quest on mobile, and this instantly gave me a mix of that feeling and old-school Doom RPG. The gameplay is a bit repetitive, and I found myself losing interest after a while. Turn-based first-person fantasy games like this really benefit from a strong story, and Orcs and Elves doesn't have much of that at all. All the characters are pretty shallow, and I wasn't too invested in my journey. But what it lacks in story and atmosphere, it makes up for in its fast-paced gameplay and fun action. It's very rhythmic and kind of hypnotic sometimes due to the attack, get hit, potion, attack flow of encounters. The graphics are pretty fascinating for a DS game. Sprites are all billboards, so they're essentially 2D characters in a 3D space. There are a ton of old school 3D effects if you like that kind of DOS feeling look, and it has some other visual flair too, like a drunken effect, a Nordic ghost man floating around, and other fun animations sprinkled throughout. There's also these old school 3D camera fly-throughs that are pretty campy and cool. The puzzles are simple and non-memorable. Same goes for any picking up items within levels. I was hoping for some cool rare drops or something like that, but none of that happened. But what I really found exciting was actually finding hidden secrets in the levels. This scratched that little primate part of my brain. Overall, this is a pretty simple game. It's essentially a ported over mobile game, but it had just enough to keep me interested and looking forward to what happened next. And a bonus game that I've been working on 100%ing from my backlog is Austin Powers for the Game Boy Color. Shagadelic, baby, yeah! Just kidding. You already know what it is. Yup, Skyrim. Wait, no, it's Metroid Fusion. I'm replaying it, as always, because I can't help myself. Metroid Fusion also happens to be the SBC Gaming subreddit Game of the Month for January. I love this game so much. This is easily one of the best Game Boy Advance games, and just games period, of all time. It's a very fast-paced game. You're getting power-ups every 15 to 20 minutes, so time flies while playing this one. There's so many fun environments and enemies and bosses. It's just so good. It's everything you ever need in a Metroidvania. It's literally in the name. It distills everything that's great about a Metroid game and mixes it with that Game Boy Advance flavor. It's colorful, fast-paced, and packed with action. Plus, it has a pretty dramatic storyline if you're interested. But I just fast forward through the boring parts. The game has a fantastic atmosphere and blend of action, cinematic scenes, and intense boss battles. The computer dialogue scenes get pretty long-winded sometimes. Someone who loves backstory and world building might love it, but if you're not into that stuff, I'd recommend binding fast forward to one of the function keys and then turbo A and B to X and Y. This will help you skip through all the junk and might even help you speed through the game a little faster. So if you've never played this before, or even if you have, I'd highly recommend adding it to your backlog. Actually, no, add it to your front log, but not before Metroid Zero Mission. That game is actual perfection on the Game Boy Advance and easily the best Metroid of all time. Sorry. Playing these games from my backlog was pretty awesome. It was especially satisfying to check these games out and check them off the list. It's the same feeling you get checking off your to-do list. Now, I don't even want to look at how bad my Steam backlog is, but that's a topic for another video. In the meantime, I'm just gonna keep playing Super Mario RPG, Zelda, and Rebelstar. By the way, I want to give another shout out to our friends over at LITXNT for sending over this trimui brick for today's video. No money exchanged hands, they just sent this over for us to check out, so I want to show them some love. If you want to play any of these games, they're included on their 128GB Surwish SD card. You can find a link in the description if you want to pick one up and support the channel. Retro handhelds are an awesome way to re-experience old games, and also play new ones from your backlog. So I have a challenge for you. I want you guys to pick 5 games from your backlog and start playing one of them today. Let us know which game you're playing in the comments. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Later! If you like this video, you might be interested in my review of the trimui brick. It is a super premium feeling handheld that's very pocketable, has amazing controls, and RGB out the wazoo. If you want to check out that video, you can click the link here.